right, we're ready.
All right. I'd like to call to order the City Commission work session for Tuesday, July 12th, 2022. And we have several items on our agenda tonight, but before we get to that exciting part, let us have the roll.
Commissioner Adamaro.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell is excused today. Commissioner Rocky Smith.
I'm here.
And Commission President Denise McGriff.
I am here as well. So for the listening audience, we have a number of items on our agenda tonight that are work session items, and they are for discussion. There will not be a decision, but there may be some general discussion about direction to staff. So the first item is the list of future work session agenda items. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you. And I will start by saying this is going to completely change.
What?
Since the time we sent this out until today, the ODOT diversion traffic report we had on there as a placeholder because we were under, we've been expecting this diversion data from ODOT. And then we were going to try to analyze it with our consultants. And then there was a pretty quick turnaround in terms of needing to respond back to Oregon Department of Transportation. The data still has not come in yet.
Of course.
My understanding is it sounds like these dates are all going to slide. So I don't think we're going to have data that's been analyzed and ready to go for August 9th. So I imagine that's going to slip. The ARPA funding, I think we're going to push as well. We do have a negotiation with one of our unions next week, late next week. So we try to want to get through that a little bit further before we come back with how we're going to break down that ARPA funding. We have plenty of time on that, so we're not concerned. And really, if you recall, the funds we received, a majority of that we had already identified uses for. Really, this is the remaining $1.8 to $2 million that's left out of that. A majority of that went to water projects and then reimbursing some of the other departments per the original guidelines that were set up. And then city-sponsored events, we're going to slide into September. We are looking at bringing introduction to traffic engineering up to that August 9th, so essentially flipping those, what we see there. And then potentially we're having, we're thinking about having urban renewal have a work session that night. If we can keep it to one item, that might be an opportunity when it is on everybody's calendars to have folks available for one of our work session retreat type meetings for urban renewal to try to get that moving again. We're struggling a little bit to get some dates.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have a question on the introduction to Traffic Engineering 101. Is that going to be led by the lovely and delightful Mr. John Lewis?
It is. He will be a part of it, but as we have, Mr. Replinger does not work for us. He's retired. We brought a new traffic engineering team on board, consultant to help us with. We did do something similar to this. We've done something for the Planning Commission as well as for the Transportation Advisory Committee. One kind of focusing on traffic engineering and one focusing on modeling. And I know that there was an interest by the commission that has asked about some of these things. We were hoping to bring forward similar to what we did with the Planning Commission to the City Commission to at least have a discussion about traffic engineering with our new consultant. And then, like I said, if we can keep that relatively shorter, I think we would potentially have time then to try to get the urban renewal group together to really look at trying to get further along on the urban renewal plan.
So one of the things that would be helpful for me to have as part of this is, as you know, over the years, I have not been super pleased with traffic reports because they are basically unintelligible to the normal person walking around here. And I would like to see a way to make it more accessible for people to understand what they are and what they're saying, because again, as we've talked many, many times when I was on Planning Commission, is that John Replinger would say, this is what the reality is of the traffic study, and then we have the public coming in and saying, this is my reality of what I see, I travel this street, whatever times they say, and trying to make it to the point to where what we are getting has some value of not just the numbers and that this intersection is this and that intersection is that, but some way to break it down with a little more, rather than a lot of stats, some more language that will help people understand. Because one of the things that I always hear, well, maybe we need to hire our own traffic engineer, and then they find out what that costs, and they just completely, they just give up. But that intersection of people's own experience versus what the numbers say and the future numbers. So, in 2025, this intersection is not going to fail. And people are going, no, well, it's failing right now because I see this, this, and this. And you know what I'm saying? That's what we hear all the time, constantly. And you heard it too as staff and planning. And people they don't have faith in those traffic reports because they don't think it's based on what they perceive as the reality. So it's kind of like our situation where we've been telling ODOT for months and years that we already have diversion. It's happening right now, and they're going, oh, well, you don't have any diversion, but we all know it, we've been in it. So it's that kind of thing. I'm just hoping we could get maybe to more plain language, I guess, and help and have it be a helpful thing instead of a barrier. I see we got your charter park stuff on here. Well, not yours, but ours, our charter park. I say our charter park. Okay. All right. So let's move on.
I've got a few.
Oh, please go right ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so I think that it would benefit this commission to at least have the conversation as to what it would look like to begin paying the commissioners. I know that this could be a sore subject or may not, sound great paying your politicians, but I do think I don't agree with that. But I will say. I think it's important to have that conversation, given the size of our city, the responsibilities that we have, the amount of time that we dedicate to this role. Even looking at smaller cities, there's usually something in place. And I'm not suggesting a full-on salary. I think there should be some sort of stipend. And so I think we should be looking at what other cities comparable to our size do, so that we can further down the line have a conversation as to what that looks like, so that we're not exclusively in the future going to be a commission of people who are no longer in their working years because they are able to dedicate that amount of time to their community.
Some of us have never stopped working. It's all work. Yeah. Do you have any issue about putting that on there?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, well, go ahead.
I struggle with it because I think, I don't have an opinion one way or the other, but what concerns me about it is those of us that have served have done so knowing that there is no, payment, and other cities clearly have stipends. I think, yes, the amount of time we put in, it could warrant that. Other communities do it. I just have a hard time being on a commission, having that conversation and planning to be here in the future. I think it's a weird conversation to have. I think it's
awkward.
Yeah, it's because we've all signed up for this role knowing that that's not a piece of it. And I don't necessarily want to be part of making a decision that impacts what happens with me. If it's a commission that's going out for a future commission, I think that makes sense. I think it could be a conversation. I just don't know how to have that conversation when the people having it are probably going to be here and benefit from it. So I guess that's the thing. I guess that's all I can say on it.
I would agree, and I understand those concerns, and that's why one thing that I would propose is that we look at, if we were to make this decision either way, that it would not take effect until X amount of years after we were to pass such a policy,
Right.
or if it were to do something. That's how I know many other public bodies have gone about doing something like that, because I'm not doing this because I want to be paid,
Right.
and none of us are up here because we want to be paid, but I do want to be cognizant of the fact that the current system we have in place right now is not tilted toward a public body that represents the entirety of its people. And if there's no good way to start having the conversation as to how you're going to begin paying your public officials, but I think it should be had.
I don't know if this changes the conversation at all. Section 12, salaries of the Oregon City Charter. The compensation for the services of each city official, city officer and employee shall be the amount fixed by the commission. A commissioner shall not receive a salary, but may be reimbursed for expenses upon prior authorization of the commission. So we are
Your
into a
voice just
charter.
dropped off on that last part, so.
A commissioner shall not receive a salary, but may be reimbursed for expenses upon prior authorization of the commission. So this would be a charter amendment type situation.
Even if it were something like a stipend.
Sounds like it.
Well, a stipend's not necessarily a salary.
Reimbursement, yeah.
But
But
it
it's
could-
not reimbursement either.
Well, it depends that it could. So I guess I would say that anybody that, well, let me just use, since I won't use the city commission as an example, let me use planning commission as an example, since I've already served on it and can't serve again for a little while. You get what you put into it. I have served with many different types of commissioners, and it's always been apparent to me which people read their packets and which people didn't. So you go into this knowing that there is work that is needed in order to fully comprehend what it is that you are looking at or hearing about. And some people don't take that as seriously as others. And that we can't do anything about. I mean, that's up to each individual. But I would say from the standpoint of the discussion, I would be willing to discuss it. I don't have a feeling about it one way or the other. Although I did make a comment to somebody the other day that I was going to request reimbursement for a ream of paper because I use a lot of paper as part of my duties, because I may print something out and I take it somewhere with me and I'm sitting there when I have
Yeah.
5 minutes here or 5 minutes there and I'm reading stuff, you know?
Well, and I think that if we were able to have some counsel as to if this would have to be a charter amendment discussion, because I mean, if we were to talk about a stipend, or, I mean, it doesn't mention a stipend, it mentions reimbursements as approved by the city commission. If we were to approve something that would reimburse us of our time, I don't know if that would be something that we could do. And if a future commission wanted to say, we don't want to do this anymore, then they could do that.
Yeah, I think that from the way I heard what the city manager said and what I read in the charter, I think that discussion for reimbursement would be reasonable to have, because I think we all could say, well, I did this and I used this, or I could quantify the amount of paper that I use as part of my
Well, and
responsibilities.
I can tell you, when I first started as a commissioner, that was also when I first started in the workplace. And I can tell you that I lost clients because of the time that I was dedicating to commission stuff, especially, and it was particularly severe then because I was learning a lot of stuff, and I still am, but it was, very, very difficult at that time. And so I just, again, not wanting for it to benefit any single one of us up here, but for future commissioners, and more importantly for the public to have a body that represents them better.
Yeah. Well, I think we can start out with the conversation
Yes.
about what, if we want to get reimbursed, what that might be, and put some parameters around it and have the commission vote on it, and then we can lead into the next part of the conversation. Because it's already in the charter that we
Yes.
can be reimbursed, so, okay. Are we good? Tony's taking copious notes. You're welcome. Come on up, Ryan. right, next on our agenda is a discussion of a vacant property registry, and that comes out of one of the items on the work session agenda, which had to do with abandoned, what's the other term we used? Abandoned and not used buildings, or falling down buildings, or,
Vacant distressed properties?
yes, distressed, that's the word. Thank you. Are you introducing this, Chief Band?
Ryan, go ahead.
Wow.
That was excellent.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Commissioners. So I'm here tonight. We're going to present some information related to vacant and distressed properties and kind of a registration process that's been out there, utilized by another jurisdiction here in the metro area, and just kind of get your feedback on a direction. So the biggest question we have is, does the city need a vacant property registry? Residential, commercial properties will be treated equally in this registration process. The city's seen an increase of vacant foreclosed properties. We don't have any local contacts. They're banks, they're other property owners around the country. So getting in touch with them is a little bit more difficult, and to correct some of the violations that we've seen. This type of behavior creates kind of an impact to neighborhood livability. You have overgrown vegetation, you have unsecured structures. That creates more of like a police response, because we're dealing with trespassers, and then code enforcement's following up with what's left on the property and trying to find somebody to be responsible and clean it up. So what this does is, once an owner moves out, they're going to be required to basically register who the owner is, who the maintenance or property manager is, and then we would provide them with clear expectations, as well as, an opportunity to correct any violations, similar to what we do right now in our city code. So I want to provide a couple slides that just have a couple photos of some properties that were unsecure. This one had a fire because it was unsecure and people were residing inside of it illegally. We went through the code enforcement process.
We just had one at the last Urban Renewal Commission meeting.
Oh, yes, yeah, down at the Cove.
Yes.
Yes, and that's a similar problem at that structure. So one of the things that we want to look at is, similar to this, we had to force this through our municipal court process to get the building secure. That would be one of the requirements of anyone who's on this registry, is to keep a secured structure. So after the insurance company dealt with it, the owner ended up tearing it down. We worked with them to resolve the fines through the court, so they didn't have to pay a bunch of money to us.
And why was that?
What's that?
Why is that?
Our main goal is always compliance. So if they want to move forward and get their proper building permits and do the demolition of the burned out structure, we don't want to penalize them for that. So if they want to work with us, then we go forward and work with them on it, instead of fining them, $300 to $1,200 a day based on violations.
Okay, well, wouldn't that help put sort of what I would like to call the fear of God into them?
That is what inspired them to work with us. So we received our initial violations and fines assessment from the judge, and then she gave them an opportunity to work with us to resolve it once it's completed.
So then, let me ask a further question. So if we are not fining them, and people say, oh, well, I don't have to worry because the city's not going to fine me, all I have to do is string the city along to think I'm going to do something, how are we recouping our costs? Let's talk about cost recovery in terms of our staff time, going to the judge, writing up the casework. I mean, it just goes on.
Currently, we do not utilize the municipal court for cost recovery unless it's a lien that we would place on the property for a property owner not working with us, because we would be in the red for all the work that we do on cleaning up these properties in the city. So
every year, I believe it's $10,000. We may have bumped it up the last budget cycle. We put a mitigation, there's a line item there. So we've had people do like illegal fill or those sorts of things. And so we will go use that account to go mitigate something if somebody either can't or won't, and then we lien that property. The problem with that is we don't really generally get the money back for that. It could be 10, 20 years. And occasionally, I think 1 or 2 years ago, we bought pretty significant one. I think in that case, somebody finally passed away, and as they went to sell that property, that's when we were able to get that money back.
Did we lien it?
Oh, yeah, it was 20, 30, maybe even more, 1,000. It was a lot of money. The other problem, sort of looking at this, banks are kind of an issue too. And I'd say generally, to your fear of God point, I was just talking to Tony about this the other day. In city government, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And for every time that we want to put the screws, or somebody wants to put the screws to somebody, there's somebody we don't want to put the screws, you know what I mean? They're legitimately people who are trying to work with us. So we get complaints from people that we're not hard enough on people, and then we get complaints in code that we're too hard on people. So we're always trying to sort of walk that balance of gaining compliance and working with people. Another challenge to just throw in the mix, banks. This registry does require a couple $100 a year. I think it maxes out at something like $500. A bank generally doesn't care. One of a citizen who sometimes sits next to you has behind his house a bank-owned property that's been abandoned forever. And it's really difficult to get them to do anything. A local owner is much easier to get movement out of than a bank who just doesn't care. As a foreclosed property or something like that.
Well, if we came in with our city-owned bulldozer, that would get their attention.
So one of the things that we see the impacts from the vacant properties, we have overgrown vegetation, solid waste. A lot of times it's things that you have a damaged structure from fire, water, things like that will be drug outside. Abandoned junk vehicles. We see the accumulation of trash outside, but a lot more so of like junk newspapers, flyers, pest control companies, those kind of things will put things on houses, kind of draws and makes it look, hey, this is abandoned, kind of a detract from it. Also, the garbage and everything attracts rodents. Obviously, the neighborhood livability declines. As we spoke about earlier, the trespassers, the police have to respond to when the structures are unsecure. And then obviously just the increased staff time from police and code enforcement. And of course, the broken windows and the graffiti that we constantly, it'll pop up every couple weeks, and then we're, in contact with them again to remove it and clean it up. Here's another property that was vacant. The owner was off-site. Somebody moved back in. You can see the top is the before picture, and then afterwards, once we work with them, and we went through the court process with them as well, and they did pay a fine to us through the court, but that's what encouraged them to work with us. So we're trying to, with this registry, get ahead of this and identify these vacant properties and get them under a really strict guideline, because our codes are already out there that people are obviously supposed to follow with their properties, but some of the properties property owners off-site just don't have a clear list. So this would be identifying a clear list, and then they would have the requirement to monthly come to the property or have a property manager come to the property to inspect it and correct any violations. So how can the registry help? Like we just talked about, provides local contacts to us and the neighbors as well. They have to provide the information of who's monitoring the property if it's not them. They have to come to the property once a month and provide that inspection. We would also then, give them the opportunity to correct violations, and we have something set up that's on this one, which is about a 14-day working day window to correct any violations that maybe we come across or the neighbors report. And that kind of goes in line with what we do with our normal code enforcement complaints right now, when it's any type of vegetation or junk on the property that needs to be removed. And then this one right here would, like we talked at the very beginning, it would provide them or provide us with the property being secured at all times. And then of course the fee being charged, it ranges $100 from the first year and maxes out at $500 on the 5th year. And that's commercial or residential properties.
What about industrial properties?
I'm sorry?
Industrial.
They would, right now, it's all considered the same. We could break it up into different ones.
No, I think you should either have residential or non-residential and kind of just leave it at that. That way, the non-residential covers everything. It isn't, because obviously as a planner, when I think commercial property, I'm thinking, oh, it's commercial property. It's not it's not an industrial property because that's not commercial.
Yeah, and we could break it up. I know the one local jurisdiction, they have it broken up into residential, commercial, and industrial, I think 3 different ways. But we could break it up into residential and commercial and then kind of combine everything on a fee structure that you guys would want to put together.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that you emphasized at the beginning, it's not only, every place in Oregon City is quote unquote a neighborhood. Some are more neighborhood oriented than others. I think it really affects city livability all the way around because you've got these properties. I requested this to be on the work session agenda because we've got several of them in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and I'll be honest, frankly, I am tired of looking at them because they are not contributing to our community, and they just are sitting there basically, creating a deficit in terms of what this community looks like. And you don't want people who are potentially looking at our community to come here with a business or their home to see these things and kind of go, because we don't know what they're thinking, but they're thinking, well, maybe the city just isn't paying attention to this. But I want the staff in code enforcement and code compliance and the police department to understand that I am not heartless when it comes to this. I'm willing to give people an opportunity. And then after that, I'm like, okay, it's time, it's hammer time. It's like, you didn't pay attention to us. You don't get 3 strikes. You get notified, you don't want to comply. Let's get your attention. And that's just me. But I know other members of this community, as you know, who call me constantly about this, that, and the other thing. And it's been that way ever since I lived here. So we need to find a balance. So if we do this, I want this to be proactive. I don't want us to have to totally rely on the community to say, hey, what about this? We need to be out there keeping our eyes open and looking at these things and saying, oh, I wonder what's going on here. Is this property abandoned? So we've got to be proactive. And our previous administration was not proactive, and that was not helpful to this community. It's got to work both ways. The community does need to report because you guys can't be everywhere and see everything, but it should not, the burden of reporting should not be 100% based on somebody calling in, because you know that they won't. They're going to call somebody else and ask us to report it. And I frankly last year I've stopped that. I said, no, you need to do it. Here's who you call. I'm not doing it.
So I just got to say a couple of things.
That's just me. I'm just speaking for myself.
Ryan, do you remember off the top of your head, you shared with me a number, you just compared Happy Valley. We were talking about staffing. We have 1.5, we're a city of close to 40,000. We have 1.5 code employees. And what did Happy Valley have?
They're currently at 4.
And what's their population?
They range, I think they're 22 to 24,000 population.
So we get this a lot. We get this
I
we get the proactive thing a lot, and generally we show the number of cases that code does. And I don't even think the previous administration wasn't against being proactive. It simply was a bandwidth sort of thing. I think if you're going to be on top of things and still have a soft delivery, you have to have a lot of staff to do it. Because I think generally, if you're following up with people, people will, 98% of the people we deal with just fall into compliance. They're just people who want to, they see we're watching, and they do what we need to do. I think we've probably been maybe sued more for code issues than police actions. I'm fairly certain of that. And it's because, when you got a code action about somebody's home is a big deal, right? If we get sued at the city, it's one thing. If you personally have have some action taken at your home about your sidewalk, or about your trees or something, that's a pretty big deal. And you can see that in what people give us when they email us or call us, or we get a tort notice for just receiving a letter. People feel pretty threatened. The other, one thing I'm just going to say about.
So we'd be getting a tort notice regarding,
We've gotten them for a variety of things.
well, just give one example, maybe.
Well.
It's already closed, obviously.
Yeah, there was a recent one I don't want to talk about. There was that. Well, I don't know if that was a full tort notice, but it was a fairly serious letter about a park and trees. I'll tell you one serious thing that when you get in the conversation of how hard do you want to enforce things, the sidewalks. If you remember several years ago, somebody had called up, somebody had tripped and fallen down because of a sidewalk, and somebody called us about that house, and we went out there and it violated things, and we said, hey, here's a letter. Somebody fell down on a sidewalk, and that person went around and came, I think, at the next commission meeting after 12 letters, so they made a complaint about 12 other neighbors who had the same problem. Those 12 people came in with shovels and pitchforks at the next commission meeting. I think you were there, Rocky. And they were furious about what we had done. Now, if you're very rigid about code issues, that's what you get into. So, and then the other problem is sort of our take on how we go about enforcement. We can't be super rigid about if there's 10 issues that code deals with, and 2 of them are super important to people, but the other 8 aren't so much. We can't just really go after these 2 issues and sort of shrug our shoulders at the other 8. Does that make sense? We kind of have to be equal in our application of how we're doing code. So how we do sidewalks and how we do signs and how we do all these things, we kind of have to be fairly consistent in how we're doing things. And that's why we're mostly complaint driven. It's not because we don't want to be out there and be on top of things. It's, we have when anybody comes in and makes a complaint on something, it gets added to this pipeline of things that we already have staff going out there working on. So there's 3 people. There's Autumn's in the office, as you know. Ryan goes out and helps, but he's doing his job managing things. And then we've got 3 people. 1.5 of them do parking and 1.5 of them do code.
Okay, well, I've heard everything you said, but you lost me on the tort. So the person that had the violation filed the tort, and then where did the other 12 people come in? You lost me there. Did they get citations as well because this neighbor came in and said that these other people had?
So the sidewalk was not a tort.
Okay.
That was an example of somebody falls down, serious. We go out and look at the sidewalk, serious deal. So you can take the approach, look at that, somebody got hurt, we need to go after, put the fear of God into somebody about this sidewalk. Well, we went and put the fear of God into her, and she went around and looked at all her neighbors. And then she made a complaint about all of her neighbors.
Okay, that's.
And I don't know if it was 12, but it was, it was 8 or 10.
That's where you lost me. I didn't understand where the other 12 people came in.
So those people come in and they're like, how dare you? You guys are being you put the fear of God into me. And so initially we're responding to somebody getting hurt. And then we had the commission at the time going, what in the heck are you guys doing? There's 12 people here who are very upset. We're on fixed incomes. So that's two completely different sides of the same issue. Which one are we going to be? Are we going to go after people, or are we going to compassionate with all the people who got a letter who are on fixed incomes? That's sort of our challenge.
Well, there's always going to be people on fixed incomes. Everybody's on a fixed income to some degree.
Sure.
But yeah, okay. I'll talk to you offline about it because I'm still a little bit lost. So did the person fix their sidewalk?
In that neighborhood, yes.
Okay.
We talked a lot about sidewalks.
Yeah,
Still are,
went from
right?
sidewalks to the tort claim, and I thought they were attached to one another. I couldn't understand why somebody who had a broken sidewalk filed a tort claim against us. That's what I was trying to understand, but it wasn't
Yeah,
that.
no, the tort claim was completely different.
Okay.
My only reason I brought up the tort claim is there are several instances where in code issues, we have gotten tort notices. And you would think it wouldn't be as serious as what we're doing against criminals and arresting people and putting them in jail, but we get sued more over code issues. I think because of the nature
Okay,
of
well,
when
I'll
you're
ask you
going.
offline, because I don't understand why somebody would file a tort against us. So you can explain that to me, or Bill can explain it to me later. So I'm just trying to understand.
All right, so one of the definitions on this is what is, going to be considered as vacant or distressed property. So they would be required to register. One of the things would be uninhabited and have some of those municipal code violations like overgrown vegetation, junk vehicles, solid waste, and or it would be vacant due to foreclosure or judicial sale. And of course, what the biggest question, would it apply to a home that's for sale? If somebody moves out, it's vacant. It wouldn't apply unless they have these violations. And then we would be, either see it or we would be notified of it. And then we would require them to be on this registry. And
Would you
then,
like to expand that so you're not limiting yourself to just that? Because sure as shooting, we limit it, situation Z is going to come up and it won't be covered under that.
the nice part is we have that kind of falling back on our existing municipal codes. And we can enforce all of those, whether the property's habited or not. And this would be kind of just that next step of trying to get in front of it and saying, hey, here's a more clearly defined, you're going to need to secure the property, manage it monthly, provide us who's going to be there each month to manage it. And then we kind of did include a little bit of a hammer on this, just this draft. And that kind of comes down into the maintenance obligations. And we kind of just talked about those. One of the extra ones I didn't mention yet was outdoor pools or spas. They need to be maintained or drained. Obviously, we don't want those to attract mosquitoes and, those kind of things.
For small children.
Right, exactly. And so it would need to be kept secure along with the fences and everything. One of the other thing would be is kind of that fees, and then there's a hammer at the end with if they're on this registry and then they violate it, once we give them the 14-day notice of, 14 working days to, complete it, there would be that potential of a $1,000 fine per day, which is above our current $300 per day. And that's just a draft item, but it's kind of one of those, we've already identified it, we've laid out more of a detailed explanation of our requirements to them, and so that's why they would have an increased fine.
You think that, I think this is too low.
Well, per day, I mean, if
No,
you give them,
for year one, $100?
oh, the registry, and that's just a draft, and it's just comparable to what one of the other jurisdictions currently uses. So we just put that into here as to give you an example.
Would it go up with inflation?
It could. You guys,
CPI.
as the commission can set the fees for it, so. And this is that final one. When they're not in compliance, we would give them obviously the 14 days, working days to comply, and then the potential $1,000 fine per day. Oh, back to that. So with that, I would just, if you guys have any questions about the proposal or have any ideas on a next step for direction.
Go ahead.
So is this something that can be done within the existing staffing level, or is this something that we need to implement this?
I think that's kind of twofold. I think for setting up the registry, we would need some assistance from our IT staff to basically create a website. So, these banks and other people out of state can easily go online, register, pay their fees, and give us that contact information. So that would be a little bit of upfront cost and staff that I'm not sure if they have the ability to do it or if we would have to contract for it. We could maintain, obviously, the current list, but to do any more proactivity and being proactive, as Commissioner McGriff stated, then we would probably need to look at some sort of an increase of staffing just to be out in the field more. And
My sort of, with code in general, I don't like setting us up for failure. So if I think the sign code is an example of something that you could have somebody working on every day, right? And so we go through this long process to come up with what that was. And I think all staff, remember when Laura was here, were kind of worried about staying on top of this sort of thing. So for us to do something well, which is what you're talking about, Commissioner McGriff, I don't like us doing things half-fast. And so that is definitely going to be a challenge. There's other things that we hear. That's kind of why I went into this conversation about staffing so much, is because we do hear this quite a bit, that people are upset that we're not proactive, but it's not because those code folks aren't working really hard.
Yeah.
And we've got the numbers of cases to prove it, I think in our last.
We just had Ms. Dahlstrid come in here for the third time about the same stuff that she's been asking about for the last 18 months. And that gave me a little bit of heartburn because she was back. Like I said, I believe in giving people the opportunity because I want to believe inherently that all people have the best intentions, but I also know when I'm being scammed, and I know when I'm being led on, and I'm sure you do too, when somebody just gets stuff done just to keep us off their back, and then they don't do anything. I mean, we all know it. We feel it in our gut. I know that not going to be popular on this side of the counter, but it's like sometimes maybe just going over and saying, hey, did you know that we don't allow these in Oregon City? And maybe you can come up with something else to advertise your business. Sometimes a friendly visit, which takes time, might just do the trick instead of this letter coming and they just throw it away or they don't pay attention or whatever they do.
Yeah, I wish that every time that we hit homers, people came in here and sat down and used 3 minutes to tell you about our success stories, but that generally doesn't happen.
She will be coming in when you get those signs down. She will. She's already told me she's planning to come in when they go away. I said, yes, please do, because we want to encourage ours. But
I know there's success stories. There's some, I won't name the business, but there's signs that had orange on them that were all over this city. Everywhere. And we recently, that's something that came in, and we started really nice and we got very serious, and you don't see those orange signs all over the place. So there's definitely a lot of things that we're doing. There's things that people will call me about or call Ryan about that get taken care of right away. That certainly doesn't mean there's not going to be times that we don't, but generally, I see a ton of examples of things that those folks are out there taking care of. I know when I see things disappear, I know that we had something to do with it. Because I'm driving I drive all over town. I'm just, because of what I did for a living, I'm naturally observant. Something changes and I go, that wasn't there. Why is that there? And then I will look at it again and say, nope, I wasn't crazy. I know that wasn't there.
I think
perhaps Mr. Kabizman could help us come up with a way where we could deputize you.
I think we all.
oh God, no.
I think all of our citizens need to be deputized and empowered to go into wherever it is and say, hey,
Well, I think I'm struggling with this because it opens a huge can of worms. I mean, it just does, because
how does getting derelict and abandoned buildings to be in compliance?
Well, what I'm saying is, code enforcement, if we want to see the things that we see driving around town every day, because every time I drive around town, I'm like, I don't think that's allowed. I don't think that, like every 5 feet, it's all over. So, I think we have to have a general conversation, especially going into the next goal cycle. Because code enforcement's now under the police department. There's been, changes with that in the last couple of years. So it's getting to the point where I think we need to have another conversation of what we want the next step of code enforcement to be. Because I think, short of putting a real priority in the budget for adding staff, we're not going to be able to tackle a lot of these things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I think we should start on it. But I think every little bit we do in one area is going to put even more of a spotlight on the other areas of code enforcement that we can address, and we just aren't addressing. And so we really need to be proactive ourselves on saying, if this is really an issue and we're going to address all these things, which clearly hasn't been addressed other than when we get complaints, then we really say, you know, in the next biennium, this is going to be a goal. We're going to have to, you know, expect a different level, which means we are going to have to, you know, accept
Yeah,
that.
but we do have a goal.
So I think we can get there, but I worry that because there's so many code enforcement issues throughout the city that we see, but, you know, how do you balance all that?
Well, I mean, we do have a goal about livability.
Oh, for sure.
And what I worry about with these buildings
Yeah.
is
No,
that they seem to catch on fire. And then in turn, that causes other problems. And if we can nip this in the bud by helping people understand that they have a part to play in keeping this community neat and orderly, by maintaining their building, it benefits everybody. We're going to have those one or two people that just don't really care, and you know we've had generations of that family in this community for years, and we all know who they are, and that is just their lifestyle. But I think genuinely, with the exception of the banks, because yes, I know about a couple of bank-owned properties that over the years it was like pulling teeth to get them to pay attention, and they don't pay attention unless you start costing them money. And I know we want to do equal treatment, but I think sometimes with those types of institutions, you have to ratchet it up. And, you know, if worse comes to worse, then we lean it, and we eventually get our money back, which is okay. But I think this is a good way to have a handle on it, and I would certainly support, as I've said with planning, an increase in staff, but it is already in our goals to have livability, and this contributes greatly to the diminishment of livability in this community. And we all know, you know, where these buildings are, and it's just I just don't think it contributes to the community, but at least it would give us a way without. Once the registry gets up and running, we have, as Ryan has outlined, contact information. We know we're not spending all of our time researching how do we get a hold of, you know, the Bank of Malaysia that's out of Kuala Lumpur, you know, that type of thing. So I mean, I support you moving forward with this, and again, having worked in the office before it went to police, it was in community development, and I worked right next door to that person that was dealing with this. And we had one person, and the city was half the size, but we had multiple problems. So I think our staff is doing, you know, the best that they can with the resources that they have, and I support that. I think this just gives them another tool in their toolbox to try to get a handle on these things. And I think in our neighborhood alone, I can think of 3 houses that are one's almost done. The other 2 are in process of, I don't know what's going on with them, but they had fires. And one of the fires got exacerbated because somebody was in it that wasn't supposed to be in it, and caused another fire, which almost set the house next door on fire. So I know those people are freaking out because they don't want that to happen again. So I think it's a way to manage this without, it's both compliance and being proactive. So I think we've got a little bit of both, and I think that the approach that you have in here is a good one. And I would support moving forward. Just speak.
Okay.
We're informal.
So, okay, I support the registry part. I think with minimal, startup costs, as you were saying with the IT, whatever it would take to get something up on the website, I would support that. And with that draft fee schedule, that would obviously be up to our discretion, but I would support that. When it comes to the proactive part, and the increase in staffing, that's where I have a bit of a hard time. And I'm not just saying that because code enforcement gave me a parking ticket on Main Street when I thought that it was after hours. I want to make that clear. I think it's, as Commissioner Smith said, it opens a whole can of worms. And so I am 100% in support of the registry, getting that started up and making sure that we know whose property is where. And this is a very timely discussion because just the other day I was talking to the city manager and I was asking him, do you know what's going on with the old Oregon City Residential Care Center on Washington Street?
And I can tell you about that.
Let's have that off the air because I mean that's a perfect example of, you know, something great that could go there, housing, you know, whatever. So I think I totally agree with the goals of why we're bringing this policy up. But when it comes to the proactive part and wanting to bring more staff on,
It's a budget thing, and I'm willing to look at the budget.
yes. But as for right now, if we were to implement this today and not, dedicate more staff to that, I think that the people of Oregon City have already proven that they're proactive, just with all the conversations that the three of us up here have with people saying, what the heck is going on with this? I would expect that to continue regardless of the staffing we have. And if we have that registry, then they can go straight. We can have something to point to and say, go over there, and we can get that figured out in the meantime.
Yeah. I think one little thing I wanted to just add as a PS that was brought to my attention by a citizen is that if somebody files a code compliance / enforcement request, that we not close it out without telling them what happened, if we know who it is. Because I've been told that cases get closed, they don't even know that it's closed, and then they don't know anything. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's not totally related to this, but it just came to my mind because I could see that person in my head saying, about this. So if the case gets closed out, they need to be, especially if they put their name on it, they need to get notified that it's being closed and that what happened, because I keep hearing this, and I don't know if that's a fact. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing.
I have a little bit of information if I could give you on that.
Sure.
And I know the city's switching to a new software program. The current one we use, so if somebody does file a concern online, it does come to us. The current process is it does get closed out from the online portion and it gets opened in our code enforcement software.
See, they don't know that.
Right. And so that's one of the hard things. And we do include a response that does go back to them on email that says, thank you for submitting this. We've opened a case, and it assigns the case number. And then it says, you can call and check back up utilizing this case number, but it doesn't do an automatic reply back with any updates or closure once the case is resolved.
That could be it, because see, nobody knows that.
Yeah.
They go on, again, they go online and they say, the case is closed, what,
Yeah. And so that's, the new software is resolving that. So I'm hoping in the next couple months, we'll have that up and running with the city IT department.
So yeah, it's just things that, we don't know, people don't know, they don't know.
Just a couple of little things. I do want to say about the proactive piece. I have people call me all the time about things. I know Ryan does, Bill does, Tony does, and we absolutely, with more staff, can be more proactive about things. Noticeably. There are certain things that if you live in a neighborhood, you're going to notice things. If I'm driving through McLaughlin and you live there and you're looking at the house across the street every night, you're going to notice some things in your own neighborhood that people driving through aren't. So some of it a little bit is just sort of the nature of the beast in terms of people living there. But I do want to say that our staff, and Ryan specifically, we hired him. His background, he just reeks customer service.
He has eyes in the back of his head too, I know.
And he has done that. He's been here a little over a year now, and I think that he's done a really good job with instilling that in the staff that are here. We've got some staffing changes that have taken place, but I think they're in a really good place, and I think we may not be that proactive. I can tell you, the people who call, if they call Ryan or they call me, we get on things. I've yet to be made aware of something where somebody's gotten a hold of Ryan or somebody's gotten a hold of me. We don't just blow people off.
No, you don't. I know that. People are complimentary of the department.
Yeah, and I'm not, that isn't to be defensive. It's more.
You're just telling a fact.
Just the staff is doing a really good job. We are not proactive, but we are thorough. And then the one thing I would say is, so we bring back a draft Do you have any thoughts on, were there some things that you didn't want to see there? And then specific to the dollar amounts, some direction on what you think. One thing I would say is, I think the 1 through 500, Commissioner McGriff, you thought that was a little light. We could raise it. We could start there, see what happens. We can always raise it later. I do think that 95% of people, just the fact that we're paying attention and they're getting a letter, they're going to pay the fee, and it's probably going to have the desired effect.
Well-
If it doesn't, we can raise the rates.
Well, here's where my brain was going. So the first one, 100, you get, it's not a pass. $100 is a lot of money to me. You get to year 2, you have $200, so you've doubled it. You get to year 3, you double that. You get to year 4 and 5. So give again, I'm into the, let's give people an opportunity to do the right thing. Because again, I inherently believe in the goodness of people until I'm proven wrong. And most of the time they don't disappoint, but there's always that 1% that it's like, okay, we gave you a chance. I'm sorry, I'm not going with, I'm not supporting you anymore. I'm not helping you anymore. You kind of dissed us.
So any more thoughts on that? So that would be in over 5 years, $100, $200, $400, $800, $1,600 on the 5th year if we were doubling it?
You're just giving them, you're getting there. Hopefully they don't get there. Neither one of you like it, right?
I don't have a concern either way.
We're not solving it
Yeah,
tonight.
we
It's
can
just,
bring
it's just
back-
a suggestion. I'm just,
It's
you
just
know,
numbers.
we want people to inherently do the right thing.
So essentially, it sounds like there's agreement that we want some type of a registry
Yes.
to go, to
Yes.
bring this back. We will put together a fee schedule that, whether it's 100, 200, 300, 400,
Yeah.
500, or whatever. I mean, that's literally just putting a number in there as
We're
to
just
what the
playing with
commission
numbers.
is.
Yeah.
All right. Number 2, Ryan, thank you so much
Thank
for
you, Commissioners.
tackling that. I know that this is a great idea. I really appreciate your putting some thought into it, and you have experience using this, which is also the bonus. So we know that it can work, and we know that it works. And it's great. And it's being proactive. All right. Commissioner Morrow, this was something you wanted on the agenda for the work session, a future work session, and now the future is here.
Yes, it is.
So, Mr. Conkle.
Thank you. So tonight we have for discussion the potential creation of an Oregon City Youth Advisory Commission. Commissioner Morrow did a lot of work putting together the proposed draft, spelling out the mission statement, the qualifications, composition. We also included as background some examples. There are quite a few out there. We just grabbed some that seem to provide a range of what we've seen from other jurisdictions, whether that's placing a youth on all of the commissions or advisory committees to a more formal youth type commission that we've seen in other jurisdictions. So we did include those in the packet for you to look through, pick and choose to set this up if this is something that the commission would like to do. I'm hoping Adam, Mr. Commissioner Morrow could talk about it a little bit about what's in here and help answer any questions that the commission may have. Commissioner Morrow and I have discussed this a couple of times. And I think it's a great idea. I think my concerns are staffing, number of meetings per year, and frequency, and then just making sure that we have good direction
Yes.
as to what we want here. Providing some guidance both to staff if we do this, as well as whatever members get on there, just so sometimes we struggle without the lack of direction as to what a committee is supposed to be doing, which can sometimes lead to disappointment and maybe a lack of focus. So with that,
So
I'm
have
happy
we
to answer
had a
any
discussion
questions, or
with
if
this-
Commissioner Morrow wants to add
the new
anything.
superintendent about this yet? Or will
sorry?
we? Go for it.
She was asking about if there have been conversations with the new superintendent.
Well,
There
she
is
just
not.
started, so she's only been here since July 1st,
Well, I know.
so,
No.
okay.
I'll just say a few things. I want to thank the city manager for working with me on this, and to Lisa for, she provided a lot of great materials for me to look over. When I went to that NLC conference a few months ago, on the plane ride, that I was reading over all those things and more from other cities, and it was really special because when I was there, the Happy Valley, Lake Oswego, and I believe there was one from like Tigard or Tualatin, who was there. They had their youth councils there. And so I had an opportunity to speak with a lot of them and their advisors or staff members and just talk about what it means to them and the importance of having something like that in their community. Because I can remember when I was in high school and trying to find ways to get involved, and I know Commissioner Smith relates to this too, trying to find ways to get involved with local government. I mean, we just really don't have that. And I think this would be a great opportunity to instill the importance of being involved in local government, because right now, the only thing everyone cares about is national stuff, federal stuff, which is all great. And that's all very, very important. But when it comes to the things that happen in our own backyard, people need to be educated on that, and that starts with doing that at a young age. And so I hear and respect the concerns about staffing, and that's something that I'm hoping we can hash out in this work session. How are we going to do this? But for me, I want to see something that we can start publicizing this fall. I would be eager to go to the classrooms. I mean, most of the teachers that are there are teachers that I had, and I would be eager to go and talk about what this would be to students in other classrooms, and I'm sure that Commissioner McGriff would as well, and Rocky, you'll already be there. So I think, I mean, that might,
No, I'm sorry.
maybe. This
I'll
may,
probably be there.
Is this something you want to announce at a work session? That's,
so this may be an aggressive timeline, but you know, I think that it's something that's worthwhile, and other cities have been pioneering this, and I think it's way past due that we do something like this as well.
I love this, and it's something that I've, kind of wanted to see for a long time, so I appreciate the effort that you've made to put this on our radar. And I've thought about this quite a bit on different levels and different times through the year. The make or break of this is going to be the dialogue with the school district and that partnership. And knowing this from being in the school, so many programs and so many added kind of opportunities for students are there as long as there's an adult in the building that's willing to put the time in to make it work.
and if it isn't, they don't.
And there just isn't, there's a lack of adults in those buildings trying to doing extra anymore. So I think the good thing is, if at all this is going to be something that we starting now is the time to do it. We have a brand new principal at the high school. We have a brand new superintendent. In fact, more than half of the administration of the high school is not coming back, so it's a fresh start in the fall. Our current administrator at the high school that is staying is Stacy Erickson, who I've actually talked about this a little bit too, who I think would be someone who has buy-in to this concept. I assume the student government would too. I think it has, if we can get the buy-in and from the school district and the high school and other possible resources in the community, I think that would really help staff if there was a way that
Yes.
could be coordinated. So I think that's the crucial piece of it. So starting with that and these new people that are coming into the district, I think is really important. I think it has so many other ripple effects that You know, I have you as a student have this knowledge, I as a teacher and a former student have some of this knowledge of the crossover between what happens with the school district and the city. And in topics like, you know, just our school resource officer, or just in general knowledge of what students know about how the inner workings of the city is. I have students that come to me constantly asking about things that are going on in the city. I've actually, as a teacher, swapped classes with government teachers to talk to their students about the structure of government in Oregon City. I mean, there's a lot of ways that I think this could be intertwined with some of the curriculum at the high school, where students really understand, you know, what is city government? What does it take to do that? How do you get involved, and what could that lead to in the future, and the buy-in that it takes for people to make that commitment to serve when they aren't getting paid to do it, and when they are, you know, putting this time in, and this concern that we have that every year there's going to be qualified people that run to serve their city, and we just we're losing. I got involved in government and city stuff because I got involved in a service club at a really young age at the Optimus Club, and saw that, but service clubs are dying. For the most part, and you know, what other ways to get youth involved. So I think this could spur on a lot of other really promising things, and actually could help the school a lot. I think the high school needs some help in a lot of ways, and this would be a way for students to have access and some ownership of what's just beyond the walls of the school. And we have students at the high school that are clearly leaders and have stepped up in the last couple years and shown that. And so I don't think there's a more perfect time to have this conversation. If it's not going to work now, it's not ever going to work. So I think this is the good opportunity to try it, and I'm willing to help with that a little bit. I know it will be a staffing concern, which it is anytime we talk about a new committee. So I think the proactive piece is to really have a dialogue with the administrators at the high school, get their buy-in. If that buy-in's not there, it's going to be really hard.
Well,
So
we're going to need to talk to the school board as well
for sure.
to get their buy-in. I've been
For sure. And I think, having a student rep on the school board for a long time is another, you know, conversation to say it's similar to that.
Do they have one?
They've had one for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, I have been suggesting for probably the last 8 years that this body have a once-a-year meeting with the school board. Because again, I don't think they understand what their role is in terms of the city, and that they are a special district, and there are state laws that apply to them that they probably have no clue about, which is why we get these wacky land use proposals from them, because nobody's doing the coordination. So I sent Adam a comment this evening, and I'll just paraphrase it. So I am supportive of exploring this further. I have a major concern about the budget implications, and I've already talked to the city manager about it. I don't know at this stage in our staffing and what we have, staffing levels that we have right now, that we have the bandwidth to do this. And we have to have somebody that does it in staff. And I can think of the natural department that would do this, and there's no bandwidth there. So I think we need to seriously look at that. I said, I don't know what the budget implications are, which we'd need to know, and who would staff it. And I said, our staff is very lean at this time and for some time to come. The other thing that I saw when I read this, I think 9 people is way too many for a committee. It just gets out of hand. I think 7 is more reasonable. And I'll give you how I got involved government story. I happened to go through a school system that had 7, 8, and 9, which they don't do here in this state. And 9th graders were expected to step up and be a part of a student council. It was to prepare us to go into 10th grade to already be somewhat of providing leadership roles. So that's how I got my start, which is in the 9th grade. I was on student council, and when I went to high school as a sophomore, it wasn't the jarring change that we deal with here in Oregon. with ninth graders being in with 12th graders, you were already, they'd already started working with us and helping us and our council. So I don't know what they do in the middle schools here, and my participation with some of the classes that we've all been involved in by doing critiques, I've been trying to ask this question at the middle schools. What do you do for student governance? Do you have a council that deals with, issues from the student store to, whatever? And I said, that is ripe for the picking because right off the bat, you've got ninth graders that have potential. And this would just be another avenue to help them. So I don't want to limit it to just high school. I think we could find some, we could have some ninth graders because I think there's potential there.
Ninth graders are high schoolers.
Well, they are here, but so again, you have to understand the system that I went to school in. So they are but they don't always have that opportunity. So,
So can I respond to that?
no, yes, you can, but I've got a couple more points. So
Okay.
what I'm concerned, like I said, my major concern is the budget. I'm concerned about adding one more thing, even though this is a good thing. So I guess I would like to suggest that before we go any further with this, that we set up some time as a commission to talk to, number one, you met the new probably, I haven't.
No, I haven't. I met the new principal
Okay,
briefly,
so none of
but
us
not
have met
the-
the new
yeah,
superintendent.
I've met the new superintendent.
Yeah, so you've met her, we haven't met her. I hear good things. Let's try doing that. And kind of get this would be one of many things that we would be talking to her about. And it's an excellent idea. I just don't want to rush it. And I know that you want to do it before the start of the school year to get people, but there's so many little loose ends that I don't want to go into something and then have to do course correct. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be pretty close to perfect.
And that's why we're having these conversations right now.
So, and this is just a discussion, and we need to hear what Commissioner O'Donnell has, and, I'm sure that maybe he's using this stuff that we're doing as a diversion from what he's got going on, but, so I think that I've read it, and I've got some suggestions, but I'm going to go through it again because I read it very quickly, and maybe there's a way we can finesse this a little more because I think we have time. I actually had recruited 2 students to be on PRAC, and because they're both so involved, they didn't think they would have time to do this, and so they both turned me down over the last 2 years. I got one, and she was committed to do it, and I talked to her parents, she dropped out, that I got the second one. He thought he was going to be able to do it, so, I have not been idle in trying to find somebody to be on PRAC, because that's one of the positions that we have. So
can I say a few things?
say whatever you want to say.
Thank you. So, yeah,
Thank you.
Everything you're saying is something that I thought about, that I've already discussed with the city manager, and what you have in front of you is by no means the final draft of what's going to be there. That's why we're having these conversations right now. And it's just as Commissioner Smith said, if it's not going to happen now, when there is a brand new administration, both at the principal level, at the superintendent level, when we have a teacher and someone who is just recently a student on our city commission being able to have those relationships, then it's probably not going to happen. And I think it's so important. And when it comes to the staffing, I recognize and I understand that. But just looking at our agenda with the commission committee reports, we've got a few of these that aren't even going to be in action anymore. We're not going to be doing the OC 2040 project advisory thing anymore, or it's already at the level where we're not going to be having certain committee and dedicated staff for just that meeting. We just hired on an assistant city recorder. So, there are many different things, and it's interesting. I think it's interesting you say, Commissioner McGriff, when you bring up concerns about not wanting to add another thing. And I never heard that when we were talking about the DEI committee and all the important work there, because it's the exact same thing. Bringing youth into our city government structure is a DEI thing. If there's any inequity in our city government, the biggest one is the lopside of the ages of the people who were involved. And so while I understand and hear the budget constraint things, I think just within my mind right now, I think there are plenty of options that we can have, especially if we do have proactive conversations with the school district, which is something that I note in my draft here. But, you know, I know DEI is a big thing for Commissioner McGriff and myself, and I think that if we're going to be supportive of DEI in one area, we should be supportive of it in every area.
I didn't say that I wasn't supportive of this. Tony's got to give us the budget implications.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, and so that's all I'm saying, is that we need to know all the facts before we, I'm ready to jump off the cliff with you, but I want to have facts in my water wings before I jump off the cliff.
Yes, and I do too.
So, okay. So
No one here is advocating
we're not
against that.
We're not in disagreement then.
Exactly.
All right. So let's move on to the next wonderful topic, which is the League of Oregon Cities 2023 Legislative Priorities Ballot.
Can I just back up for a second? So we so trying to get some clarity on what you'd like us to do next.
Setting up a meeting with the school district.
Okay, is there, how would we like to walk through, do we want to start walking through kind of what Commissioner Marl, the mission statement, qualifications, composition? Are there comments or concerns on that you want to forward me? Or are we comfortable with that? I'm sorry.
I will go through this one more time and I will mark it up and I will get it to you and Commissioner Morrow.
Okay. All right.
I had nothing that stood out to me. I'll go through it again too, but.
And the other concern that was brought up was the number. That was, that's definitely something that can be subject to change. When I was looking at what other cities who have done this successfully have done, that seemed like the kind of happy median there, but that's not something that, is dead set for me.
Thank you.
But as far as a future meeting would go, I'm not sure we need to schedule a public meeting so much as if we wanted a few commissioners to meet with some administration and the city manager and superintendent or whatever. What would you?
Yeah, I would love to be a part of it. I would be interested in being part of it. I think if you get, it definitely would require, having the new superintendent, the new principal. I believe Stacey Erickson would be a good person to have on there because she's she's dealt with a lot of that kind of leadership things at the school too. So yeah, I think just a conversation about this is what you're looking for, this, get their input on it and see what their buy-in is. And they might say, oh yeah, we can. I think knowing how much they're willing to put in is going to tell us a lot about.
I agree.
The amount of work that's going to be for the city.
But again, as much, I appreciate when we deal with planning issues, I appreciate your perspective because I'm really close to it.
Right.
So I think you need an outside perspective, which is either me or Commissioner O'Donnell, because you guys are super close to it. And sometimes, again, you need that step back and go, okay, well, I've taken a deep dive into this.
I'm fine with that too, yeah.
So.
Well, I'm
But
yeah.
I mean, my son has been out of school for a number of years, but when he was going through school, it was a deep dive for me. I mean, I was on every committee you can imagine.
Well, and I will say the other part of this is we do have a student council at Oregon State High School. And there is definitely a certain type of student that becomes a part of student council. And so what I want for this to be is an alternative means for students to get involved in leadership positions and gain that really good experience. And you'll notice one thing for the qualifications part. I originally had a GPA requirement, which is what I saw in many other cities, but in having conversations with the city manager.
I think he took it out.
Yeah, I ended up taking it out.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Because
Yes.
people get penalized enough for not having GPAs that are,
Exactly.
it's got to be 2.0 or above.
So
It can't be like 1.9.
Right, and so what I want this to be is an avenue for students to not only get involved with their local government, but to also get leadership experience that they would otherwise not get
Right.
by, being excluded from something like a student council or something like that.
But we also have other opportunities here, as, when you went to high school, we didn't have alternative high schools when I was going through high school. We have several of them here, and they should also be afforded that same opportunity.
Right?
And that's why it's students who live within the city limits of Oregon City.
Right, yeah, it definitely has to be city limits. So I think what would be helpful if in your spare time, give us some idea of the budget implication for this. Commissioner Morrow brings up that, well, we're not going to be doing 2040, but let me tell you, DLCD has another project for us, which we will
Of
have to have a
course.
committee. So that's going to get filled up with a different thing. 2040 may go away, but we got the RTP, we got the climate friendly, and God knows whatever else they're coming down the pike. It's not going to end. So it's not going to come off
I
the list.
understand that.
Yeah, so I wish that we were taking some stuff off of this list, but they have other ideas at the state level. So does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So let's talk about legislative priorities.
Thank you. So staff is requesting that the City Commission take the time to review the 2023 legislative priorities put together by the League of Oregon Cities. They are asking that each jurisdiction turn in their top 5 priorities, which then they will compare with what all the other responding jurisdictions say to help them craft their priorities for the upcoming legislative session. So let's put a little bit of the narrative in the executive summary. Essentially, they had policy committees that were created that came up with the legislative priority options that they've identified in the packet that I provided to you. So really just helping to see where the commission is at, see where we have agreement, and then try to come up with our top 5 here that I can forward to them by August 5th. Or move forward to the League of Oregon Cities by August 5th.
And this would be top 5 of the subheadings for each of these different committees.
Correct, yeah. So, yeah, under each, under like Community Development Policy Committee, there's full funding and alignment for state land use initiatives, local funding to address homelessness, infrastructure funding to support needed housing. So there was, underneath each one of those, there were specific programs, yes.
So I just pulled up the calendar. So we have 2 commission meetings in between now and the 5th. So maybe we should have our priorities by that meeting of the 3rd, unless people can get them to them sooner. Did anybody see anything that just stood out to them immediately in looking through this?
I will say the 2 that really stood out to me are the local funding to address homelessness. Of course, we all know, I think many cities are going to be putting that in their top 5, that or the infrastructure funding for support, to support needed housing. But the other one that stood out to me was 5D, address Measure 110 shortcomings. There have been a lot of stupid things to happen in our state in recent years, but out of all the stupid things that have happened in our state, that's probably one of the dumbest things that has happened. And we are seeing constantly
You're being kind.
the shortcomings of that policy. And I can tell you there are a lot of conversations happening about Measure 110 at the state. They even changed the name of their Judiciary Committee in the legislature to Committee on the Judiciary and Measure 110 Implementation, because it's such a big thing. And so I think making it known how the shortfalls and why localities need support on that is definitely something that I would be supportive of forwarding to the LOC.
Okay, unfortunately, I didn't remember what 110 was, but, because I went through this really fast. Restore
That was-
criminal justice incentives for seeking treatment for addiction while ensuring path to expunge for successfully completing treatment program.
It decriminalized drugs.
Hard drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't vote for that.
And so now the options that our law enforcement have right now are to give them a very low citation of is it $100?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we catch somebody with user amounts of the big drugs, they are either given a $100 fine or they agree to take an assessment. The assessment does not mean that they have to seek treatment. They just have to do a drug assessment. And then there is written into the legislation that a court cannot go after the person for not paying the $100 fine. What sort of exacerbates it, there was a study that says in 2020 that ranked Oregon 50 in the country for available drug treatment. And so one of the things this bill was supposed to do was
Provide
focus
for
on
drug
treatment, and we have no treatment in Oregon.
So it was
not.
supposed to provide for treatment and it didn't.
Well, I
Right
think
now.
there's,
Well, I mean, right now,
Yeah. Well, and because there's no mechanism to enforce the very low $100 fine, officers are not even giving it. So in turn, there's nothing that's being done.
So somebody could be endangering themselves and others, and we can't really do a heck of a lot about it. What the bottom line is.
As of the passage of this measure in 2020.
Yeah, and that was, I remember that being on the ballot, and yeah, that was not good. Okay, did anything jump out to you?
Well, it seems to me that some of these were on our list before. I can't off the top of my head remember what our last list was.
Oh, like 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, I think that there might, some of these are similar, but it'd be interesting to look at those and see if we felt that there's been movement enough on those to replace them with other issues.
So I'm not sure what those were.
It's been a while, but if we could look that up, it'd be kind of helpful maybe to see.
So on the one, 7D, why did the state up how much they are taking? Did that just happen automatically? I mean, the state is eaten into the tax
For
that,
marijuana?
yes.
That was was that part of 110 as well? There was where this, I can't remember
supposed to
exactly what
cover
happened,
the
but the state
treatment.
essentially is keeping more of the revenue that's collected at the state level. It's distributed to each jurisdiction, so the state is keeping additional funds, so that was an impact to our budget. And
those funds were supposed to be used for the treatment part that didn't get done?
I'd have to go back and.
Okay, that's okay.
There's been a couple of these that have come through. I can't remember if it was treatment or education or a combination thereof.
Yeah.
And the bill that was in the last legislative session, the one that would have increased the amount that localities can charge for the marijuana tax, that one failed. Or that one died pretty much in committee, is that correct?
Yes, that did not make it through.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So when do we want to try to get this information back to staff so they have time to get it in? Whoops.
Would it be, one way to do this would be to take your time, go through, rank them, send them to me individually, and then I can
Combine them.
I can combine and see where we're at to maybe come back and
then
folks can, and the
Yeah, so
commission.
we have 2 meetings, so we could set a deadline for ourselves to get to you maybe, but, well, do we think we could do it by the 20th, get them back to you by the 20th?
Of this month?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I just want to take my time, and I have some marks up to your stuff, but, just the way that LOC printed it, it's really hard to read it. Just like, I said, just.
We're choosing from the green highlighted
Yes.
topics
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
Correct.
yeah. Okay, all right, that sounds good.
And not to, I think when I looked at it, the homeless local funding obviously is something
Right.
we're dealing with.
Right.
The marijuana tax one did hit us. We've
Yeah.
been really trying to reinvest those funds with some of the initiatives we're taking on here. The 110 shortcoming, cybersecurity and privacy. I know it's not glamorous, but
Which one?
Cybersecurity
8D.
is a big one that we see just constant intrusion attempts at the city. funding for recovery of abandoned RVs. Jim could talk to this a little bit, and just that when we do run across these RVs, the tow companies won't take them.
Right.
So that's just, it's a significant added cost to us to try to get them out of our community. We don't have as many as other jurisdictions, so I'm not sure how much of an impact it is for us specifically here in Oregon City. We've been dealing with it, but we talked a little bit about the infrastructure needed. The other one is alcohol revenue. There's another one where, those are being, the proportion we're getting is being reduced.
Yeah, 7E. Yeah, that was one I circled right off the bat, was like, oh, yeah.
But we can go back and find the last time we did this. We'll circulate that. And if the commission's comfortable forwarding your rankings to me, I'll put it together in a matrix and we can forward it out for a discussion in another meeting.
And you want us to do like the top?
5,
Okay.
please.
Okay, it shall be so. All right. So life, the universe, and everything into the world of the city manager. It's the next item.
I don't have anything
There must
else
be
for tonight.
something. I just find that incredible that you say you don't have any. I know that there's all sorts of stuff going on around here.
He's accomplished everything. Done.
answer.
I love that.
Nothing unprepared for her tonight.
I love that. Rocky said, well, everything's been done. Okay, sounds good.
We're good.
All right, so let's take commission reports. So for instance, on A, that's one of the ones that needs to bring, so we're not doing anything with that? Do we want to take that off that list?
The Blue Ribbon Committee for Beavercreek Employment Area?
Yep. Or will it be coming back at some point in time, rising from the dead?
Let me check. I will get back to you whether we can
Okay.
remove that one or not.
CIC, Mr. Morrow.
You were there.
Oh, yes, I was.
In my absence.
Yes, I was there.
Thank you, I appreciate
Oh,
that.
you're welcome. That's 2 already, so boy, he's going to owe me big time here. Well, yes, they had a very lively meeting. We went in person, and I went in person to meet, and basically, it was just reporting out and still working on trying to get representatives from those areas. Now, we do have somebody attending from South End, but not officially. Hillendale is still struggling just a little bit, but they're moving forward. All the other neighborhood associations. The biggest complaint that I heard is that they want us to open up some of our city facilities. It should be our responsibility to find them a place to meet. And I said that the city is working on reopening the library for meetings, and we have to be careful about doing that. And of course, a week later, all the COVID numbers came in, and Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas all went into the high category. So it's like, we're darned if we do and we're darned if we don't. So I think we are sympathetic to helping them find places to meet, but I don't know if it's our responsibility to have a place for them to meet. So you guys can tell me what you think. I didn't really say that at the meeting. I just said, well, we have reasons why our facilities are still closed. Am I wrong?
No, and I think that was one thing that we talked about with ARPA funding, was to look at how we can harden some of the facilities to make them a little bit more accessible for some community meeting type situations without the need for staff to be here.
Right. And the library's definitely working on that and almost got that solved, but not quite.
Right. No, yeah, we're not there yet. How do we, what improvements are necessary at some of our facilities to allow access after hours?
Right.
Where we don't have to have staff
And you
here
could
waiting
report
to
on that
lock
at the
up
next
and
meeting,
monitor.
that we are working on that particular item.
And I have told them that.
Yes, and I have too. I've told them that too.
Another thing on neighborhood associations is the last meeting we had, when we had people coming in about the trees at Stafford Park, when we took a little break, I ventured out into the audience to speak with some people, and I did meet someone who was interested in getting the Rivercrest Neighborhood Association back up and running, which I'm really excited about, because that is where I live,
That's your
and since
neighborhood.
the passing of Karen Morey and Ed Lindquist has kind of started to step back on his involvement there, we need to get that restarted and reinvigorated with some new blood, and so I'm really excited about that, because everyone keeps asking me to do it, and I am not going to do that.
No, you can't
So,
do it.
yeah, I'm
plate
thrilled
is-
about
Your
that.
plate is full. Yeah. Yeah, she has come to a couple of McLaughlin neighborhood meetings, and I know she's going to other neighborhoods to look at that. So I get the next one, since I also filled in for Commissioner Amaro on C4. And I will tell you that it was, I'm trying to think of the right words to describe the reason that I didn't want to be on that group. It's not that the participants weren't of interest and the things that they had to say were of interest. Almost the entire agenda was filled up with a presentation by some very knowledgeable Oregon Department of Transportation staff people talking about the new tolling policy that is going to be pushed through the Oregon Department of Transportation's commission in August. And to a person, C4 said, no, we are pushing back. So a letter went out today, which I have a copy in front of me, that is basically saying, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the proposed amendments to Goal 6 tolling and congestion pricing. By the way, you did this during the summer when people are gone. Number 2, there's a short timeline. Number 3, it takes time for these jurisdictions to meet. You need to push back your deadline because this is not working for us. I, much to your chagrin, stayed pretty quiet at the meeting and typed into the chat that Oregon City had already gone on record as opposing tolling. It really doesn't matter what they do with this policy. We are not supportive of this. And until they answer our questions that we submitted in a probably 7-page letter 18 months ago and answer these questions that we and the other jurisdictions in the corridor had, it's a no-go for us. So that was my comment for the entire meeting.
Yeah.
So the letter went out, and basically, it says, if you want me to send you, I can send this to the city manager, and I just got it today, so. But anyway, it's quite comprehensive. They asked us if we wanted to submit a letter of our own from our city. They gave us kind of a template, and I really think that this kind of says it all. Our resolution also says it all, so I'm going to say no, that we should, we don't need to send a letter. We have already sent letter after letter after letter. So anyway, God bless you for doing this.
And God bless you for taking my
It
spot.
won't last.
Don't want to go there again. Please don't make me go. Anyway, so we have the Clackamas County I-205 Tolling Diversion Committee.
Yes, so part of the reason I didn't feel too bad about missing that is because they talk about a lot of the same things at that meeting.
Yeah, so
since it is a
overlap.
subcommittee of C4.
What is the purpose of that? I saw the notice from ODOT asking for us to volunteer somebody. I thought, why?
Oh, yeah, the purpose
Is
of
this
that
to
meeting
check
is
the
to waste
boxes?
time.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
And not answer questions.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we had our last one. We meet the third Wednesday of the month, so our last one. Last month, we did receive some interesting information. So, as you know, with the whole NEPA process, they have to undergo an environmental assessment, and they have changed the scope of that. So originally, it was just looking at Phase 1A, which is the Abernathy Bridge part. But now they are expanding that to include the entire I-205 project, if I'm understanding correctly. And that will be slated to release in early fall of this year, with decision documents to be released in April of '23. They did complete a 2027 analysis to inform mitigation on diversion. And so they were telling us that there will be further mitigation discussions with partners in June in July, which I'm hoping is of this year. I didn't specify that in my notes, but we're already halfway through July.
Yeah, we are.
And the other thing is that Phase 1A, the Abernathy Bridge improvements, they did tell us that they will be built regardless of tolling or not, which is great, due to the financing from HB 3055. And then they also presented to us another heat map of which areas will be affected more and which ones will be affected less. And so of note to us it showed on Main Street, there was a noticeable change, which noticeable means negative change, southbound between 10th and 99E, but there was little change northbound. And then I will note that disproportionately the failing intersections were in our area along McLaughlin, for obvious reasons.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. So that's what I have.
Okay, that sounds like big fun. So Clackamas Heritage Partners, I actually had a conversation with Ms. Yazzolino this morning at 7:45.
Well, maybe we haven't met, so I don't have much to update. They're, in the open and getting back open and
Right.
getting back on track. And so I'm sure our meetings will start back up, but we haven't been meeting.
Yeah, she's got a line on some additional staff, which is what she was telling me this
Yeah.
morning. And she said she's working with the city on some of the deferred maintenance items. There were some concerns about what the place looks like now that Concerts in the Park will be opening
Right.
on Thursday.
Yeah, I'm just reading. She
Some
sent
power-
out
Some power washing, et cetera.
an email regarding Concerts in the Park coming up and little update on where they're at. So getting back on track, but
Yeah. Okay. Clackamas Water Environment Services Policy Committee, I have not been notified of any meetings as of late, so do I need to contact somebody? I've not received anything from them. I don't even know if they know that I'm taking Rocky's place.
We'll contact them.
Huh?
We'll reach out.
Okay, you'll reach out to them?
great,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know
Wes?
who the- I don't know who the them is, so.
For Wes?
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. Okay, so I'm making a note.
Okay.
Tony will get in touch. All right, Downtown Association, we had our board meeting this morning. Primary discussion was changing over some systems to make it more efficient for tracking with the Main Street. We had a presentation by Sherry Stewart. Actually, it was a conversation with Sherry Stewart about how to do asks for the Friends of DOCA. The other thing we talked about is, of course, this Saturday is the reopening of the First City Festival. And gosh, I remember back when we
Wow, yeah.
started that, and it was all hands on deck for the city staff, and we all volunteered. But anyway, so that'll be this Saturday from 11 to 8. And they told me, they said, we're going to start setting up at 5 a.m. And I said, well, unfortunately, without me, I'll be down there, but I will not be down there at 5 a.m. So that's going to be happening. The city has been very helpful in getting the last of the permits together. They did have a problem with OLCC where they actually had to walk the permit down to their office that was submitted 18 months ago that they didn't ever get any response back from them. But apparently the city has it. So we hope that everything comes off as it should be. The one thing I will say about First City is there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect with Clackamas Fire District Number 1. Apparently they were not familiar with Main Street enough, and so some of the things that they want the fire truck to go right down the middle of the street. And part of the thing had to do with where booths can be because of electrical connections.
Right.
And they said they didn't really care, and it was this way or the highway. And I thought, okay, that was not really good. So hopefully next year they can get more educated about what downtown has to offer in terms of connections so that they could be more reasonable about setting up. But I will be down there from before 11 till God knows however. So anyway, I hope to see people come through.
Down there.
The other one is the Metropolitan Policy Advisory Committee. So this was my second meeting, and it was very interesting topics. The previous month, I think I reported on the report from the houseless, homeless providers, and that was very interesting. I got to watch the rest of the meeting because they'd recorded it because I had South Fork. So again, you know, the diversion, the I-205 is a big topic of conversation. They also spent quite a bit of time talking about the RTP, which Metro is working on. Goodbye, Matt. We're going to have a question for him, then he's going to walk out the door, right? No, please go home. If Tony says you're excused, so we don't get to say that. So that was a big topic of conversation, and I think this C4 letter ties that in, that says those processes with the development of the RTP, the Regional Transportation Plan, and what ODOT is planning. It's like the two organizations have not talked to each other, and why are we doing these things on different schedules when they need to be coordinated? So that was a large topic of conversation. Obviously, OC 2040, we are winding down on that, which is really great. And, you know, we owe a great deal of debt to Laura Turway for shepherding that, and Aquila has picked up the ball and is running with it. It will probably be replaced with this climate-friendly communities initiative that we are going to have to do, and God knows whatever else is coming down the pike.
And the letter was sent, was that an LOC letter that was sent?
Which letter?
About the climate-friendly DLCD rules?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that came out of LOC. And pretty much everybody, most of the cities and counties that are affected by that, there's the cities that are affected by that signed on to that letter, so. All right, you got actually reported at our meeting with Mr. Graham about what was going on with the tourism stakeholders group, which was
Yeah,
great.
so I talked about that at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no updates on that. We'll have another meeting.
Yeah, and then we're leaving L on because it will come back from the dead, but obviously we're not meeting. It's never going to go away. And you would not believe, but in the last 3 days, I had people talk to me about diversion, and they said, well, isn't the state closing down the Oregon City Westland Bridge so they can have more capacity on the Abernathy? No. People are thinking that it's going to be closed. So South Fork Water Board. So obviously we did not meet last month because everybody was in San Antonio except me and Adam.
We have a meeting coming up.
And we do
on
have a
the
meeting coming up.
27th, I think.
Yes, we do, on the 27th. And I will probably be available for that meeting. I'm not going to ask any of you to take my place at MPAC. I'm just going to be absent at that particular time. I will let Chair Buck know that I will not be there. I have to be a grand poobah at something else. So Willamette Falls and Landings and Heritage Area Coalition, we have a meeting coming up on the 18th, but we had our previous meeting in between, and I will tell you that the big issue that the group is dealing with. So we have a couple of things. Our website's been updated, which is really great. It's more DEI friendly and more recognition of other stories that have to be told. We have also updated a bunch of our policies as well in terms of board appointments and those sort of things. We did receive a report from former chair Alice Norris, and they have recommended some appointments to the board. We have a couple of board members who are now working for organizations that do not allow them to participate in this. And then there was the issue of the tribes. And the nominating committee recommended that we table that discussion about bringing new people on until we have had a frank discussion about that. So that is where it stands right now. I also serve on the RDEI committee. So our new chair is Russ Axelrod, who was obviously former mayor of West Lynn. And I'm trying to think, our vice chair is Charlotte Lehan, former city councilor from Wilsonville. Jody Carson is still the treasurer, and I don't know who the secretary is, but anyway. So there's definitely a division amongst the board about these particular appointments, and I will let you know what else happens. So we are going to have a separate meeting to talk about it, because I think at a board meeting, we started talking about it and it went around the table about 20 times, and I made a motion to table, and that was the end of it. So more fun to come. And we don't have Commissioner O'Donnell here with the last one because they're not meeting. And we were going to talk at some point in time future about how we're going to back ourselves out of that, but that's for a later date. So that is it.
If I could just add one more thing, Jacob was able to find real quick, August 5th, 2020, City Commission meeting, unanimous vote. The issues forwarded to League of Oregon Cities were COVID-19 recovery investment, infrastructure financing, mental health service, and local speed setting authority.
Could you just send that to us in an
Yeah.
email? That would be great, because I couldn't write that fast. Is there any good of the order? Welcome back, Chief Band. I just said welcome back. Mr. Wiley, do you have anything for us? Mr. Kabizman?
What comes next?
Okay, all right. Being no further business and no good of the order, we will adjourn into executive session.